Welcome to another report from Catholic Family News. I'm Brian McCall, and I'm very happy today to be joined by Professor Janet Smith. I guess it's Professor Emeritus, correctly, as I think you've retired recently.
I've retired, but emeritus is a particular title I did not
Yes.
have.
Okay. But you are retired. And for our viewers who probably few who may not know, but Professor Smith formerly held the Father McGivney Chair of Life Ethics at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, where she taught for a long time in Detroit, Michigan. She's done many things, written and spoken, and also was a consultor for the Pontifical Academy for Life for many years. And by way of introduction, I'll just say, and we've not talked about this, but you played a very important role, your work, in when my wife and I actually came back to the faith. I never know what to call it because we were raised Catholic, but I went to a Catholic school, but was taught in senior religion class that it was okay to use contraception as long as you didn't do it all the time. But when we came to find the truth about Catholicism, when someone sort of indicated us that's actually not what the church teaches, we found some of your speeches and your writing, my wife and I, and were very personally influential on us coming to learn the truth that we didn't know before in our 20s. So it's really an honor as a result of that, particularly to get an opportunity to speak with you.
Well, thank you. That's always a pleasure to hear, of course. And I often think it says more about the people who are converted than the person who's persuading them, because it means there's something in your heart that's very open to it. It's not an easy truth to practice in a way, and so people have all sorts of motivation not to accept it, and especially since it's not powerfully taught from the pulpit or by the bishops or even by the Pope at this point. Um, Everybody has an easy out. I haven't been told this. I don't really know it. Blah blah blah. So those who really get it and live in accord with it are just really impress me. My talk is available for free on my website, janetsmith.org. It's also on many different YouTube things. There's many different versions of it, but there is one on my webpage.
Yes, and it is. This is one we have listened to, "Contraception, Why Not?" and it's available for free download, as Dr. Smith said. So, on that topic, one of the things I'd like to talk with you about is we've seen in the last year a certain victory, and I always qualify it because I think it's really we've just begun to fight, not ended it, but a certain victory with abortion, with the Supreme Court enabling states to begin addressing that issue, somewhat of a tide turning among the American populace. More than a majority of Americans now are found to support the Supreme Court's decision, at least on some restrictions. So there's, at least I say, a momentum in that direction. But when it comes to the truth, the natural and divine law truth about contraception, at least from my perspective, I haven't seen that corner turned yet. And, we are now almost 100 years from Casti Connubii, and we're 50 years more from Humanae Vitae, and it seems like not a lot of progress has been made in convincing minds and hearts about this issue, even among those who are opposed to abortion. So I guess first question would be, do you agree with that assessment? Do you think that things have not dramatically changed in terms of that issue?
I have not seen recent statistics.
Mhm.
I, I I doubt that you'd see a huge uptick. I mean, it
Mhm.
seemed like there were, probably 2 to 10% of Catholics who accept the church's teaching on contraception. So if it went from 2 to 4%, that would be 100% increase, but it's still not a lot. Uh, but I really do think you use the image of turning a corner. I want to use
Mm,
one kind of bubbling up. That if there are more and more testimonies online by women who have very secular women, feminists who have used contraception and found it to be just horrible.
mm,
Tammy Peterson, Jordan Peterson's wife, and his daughter have both made a little video against contraception. There's a lady comedian who has done a bit of a skit against contraception. I wish I could remember the lady doctor's name now, but her book is called "What Contraception Does, What Birth Control Does to Your Brain." I think that's the name of it.
mm.
It's an amazing kind of groundswell of feminists against chemical contraceptives.
Mm,
I still don't understand the profound, of course, the profound anthropological and theological reasons why contraception is wrong. But they really are sick and tired of putting these chemicals into their bodies. And I spent an enormous part of my talk actually talking about the bad side effects of contraception, the way that they change a woman's mood, make her depressed, help her gain weight, which of course makes us more depressed, irritable, not interested in sex, which is a bizarre thing that you take a drug to help you have sex and you're not interested in sex. So it's blood clots, some forms of cancer that are increased by contraception. I think migraines. Women are finding out that when they've been on contraception for since high school, that they've taken it for 10, 20 years and really never been off of it for any length of time, and they feel like a whole different person. The thing that's I maybe most impressive to women is that it really changes their relationship with males. Women and women really do have it's technically correct to say we have a chemical attraction to each other. The pheromones are that we perceive from another person that draw us to some people and not other people. And there even seems to see some biological strength in those, that it draws us to people with which we're more, at least biological compatible to have children with. But women are finding they don't have the same attraction to the same man when they're on contraception and not on contraception. And the woman who's not contracepting is powerfully attracted to certain men, where her attraction to almost all men is leveled out when she's on contraception. And in fact, is more drawn to someone who doesn't have a powerful sexual appeal to her because she kind of wants a brother or a friend to help her. Because what contraception does, just briefly, is it puts a woman into a state of pseudo pregnancy. Her
mm,
body thinks it's pregnant. So you don't have all the hormones that are driving you to mate with a
mm.
male and have a child. That's biologically, evolutionarily true. So when you're already pregnant or in a state of pseudo pregnancy, you don't have that powerful sex drive to mate with a male. So you're happy to have a male around who is kind of bland, even
Mm.
because you just want someone to kind of lean on. And so women are discovering this, and they've started to realize that contraception has not been a uptick for them in their lives.
It's interesting. I think it's one of the videos you mentioned. I can't remember which one. Where it is. It's a lady who says, I go to Whole Foods. I only buy food that doesn't have, beef that doesn't have hormones given to the animals, eggs that are. He goes, but then I realized, but I'm pumping all these chemicals in my own body, even though I don't want to eat any food that had it. Which again is, all these things you say are true, and it's obvious everywhere in the moral order that one can see the moral problem directly, or in all things the consequences of failing the moral order, because always there are these practical consequences that we can see in nature. But
Can I
I oh
comment
yeah.
on that for a minute? I mean, one of my sisters is fighting a very virulent form of cancer, and the
Mm,
chemo has not done much good at all, except make
mm,
her very, very sick. It's a
mm.
recurrence of cancer that she'd had 20 years ago. And we've everybody sends you all sorts of information, of course,
Yes.
buy this, buy that, and God bless them, thank them. And she is finding that having a plant-based diet and drinking a lot of carrot juice and using a lot of parsley,
Mm,
um, she's feeling so good.
mm,
In just every way. Her fatigue's down, just much more energy, just
mm,
in every way. And the doctor says, well, you're sort of choosing quality of life over quantity of life. We said
mm.
the quantity seems maybe 2 or 3 months longer than she would have lived otherwise, and probably on chemotherapy and somewhat miserable.
Yes.
So anyway, in order to, as I've been following her on this, I've been reading all more about nutrition and starting to eat
Mm,
very differently. And the same thing is just our, as people are saying, Americans have a terrible, terrible diet, and our diet
yes.
has really, in a certain sense, ruined our nutritional system. And some of
Mm,
us have to go on fairly bizarre diets. I mean, Jordan Peterson is on a meat only diet. And where in the
Mm.
history of mankind have people had I mean, I guess sometimes I think maybe cowboys had a meat-only diet. They
Right.
probably
Yes.
had salads out there on the range, potato or 2, but, um, I mean, the fact is that we are all learning that we need to take a lot of care
Mm.
of our bodies, and putting chemicals in our bodies doesn't make a lot of sense. And
Mm.
so I think that is one of the major, you know, chinks in the armor of the pro-contraceptive people is that doesn't ally with our new appreciation for organic foods and
Mm.
not processed foods, genuine, out of the garden, fresh foods, etc. Um, don't take chemical contraceptives. And I want to say the non-chemical contraceptives, the barrier method, so-called, the diaphragm and the
Mhm.
IUD, the condom. It does, if people just think about it, the very description of it, barrier method.
Mm.
I was gonna say, if you're making love to someone, the last thing you want is a barrier in the way.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
this thing like I've gotta get my prophylactic on, and prophylactic means a guard, something is guarding
Mm.
against something. So again, you're seeing something about the other person as being an alien, something that
Mm.
is dangerous for you because you need to fight it off. And I would say if you really love someone, you're gonna go all in, and
Mm.
accepting someone's fertility is really the most extraordinary affirmation of another person. Saying to this person, "I would love to be the mother of your child. I would love to be the father of your child. I want a lifetime union with you." And engaging in a non-contraceptive act of sexual intercourse almost says that as powerfully as anything else can say is that I love you like I love no one else. I want my life
Mm.
completely entangled with yours. I want to go through the whole process of bringing up new little human beings that I hope look like you and sound like you and laugh like you and think like you because I love you. So I'd love to bring some more of yous into this world. And to think that is written into every sexual act, that it is not contraceptive. And then, obviously, if the couple is aware of that and intends that, think of even the healing it can do to marital strife. That you might have had a rough day with each other, and
Mm.
but then you say, well, wait a second, we're spouses. We can do something that really brings us great pleasure that we do with nobody else and means
Mm.
something that, even if I haven't behaved all that well today, I just really do wanna give myself to you in a way in which I don't give myself to anyone else. And so a lot of the irritants fade away when you have that kind of profound, message to give with your body to your spouse.
Mm. Well, that's a very beautiful point. Very true. Following up on that, because we've talked about sort of these natural, in the physical and psychological sense, consequences of it. But if we abstract a little bit more to the moral level, to what extent is it not possible, is to what extent is the problem that people are not accepting the true understanding, the true nature of marriage in terms of the end of marriage? And until that problem's solved, it's difficult to explain or get people to accept the moral
Yeah.
difficulty, moral problem with contraception.
And it's not just the marriage, you're right, and I'll move towards that, but it really is not understanding what it is to be a Christian.
Hmm.
It's not understanding what a radical thing that is. It's not just like I'm a Yankees fan or I'm a Cleveland fan. When you're a Christian, again, it's an all-in thing. You want your life to be absolutely governed by God's will. You need to work very hard to fall absolutely in love with God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, God the Father, God the
Hmm.
Son, and God the Holy Spirit, and know that they are with you every moment. They are cheering for you. They are pouring graces upon you. Um, and a key point is it's a mantra I've developed late in life with basically is that God's will is better than my will. And so if it's clear what God's will is, it doesn't matter how much I beg him and plead with him. I really don't want to get my will because his will is better than mine. And so So what is God's thinking? I mean, God created the whole world. He obviously put a very high value on sexuality. It's the very one of the very learn about the creation of the world, and the same time we're learning about the creation of the world, it's clearly leading as a kind of a climax of the whole thing is the male and female are created, and male and female are meant to cling to each other, become one, and be fertile and multiply and fill the earth. God loves new life. He made the whole universe for new life. And he wanted new life to come into existence through the same kind of love that he has for us, which is an unconditional, absolutely generous love for his creation. So he wants us to be loved that way by our spouses and to give that same love to our children. And that so then you begin to see fertility not as our culture looks at it as a threat against which you need to have a barrier or some sort of chemical guard. You see fertility as a great, great gift and actually something that a Christian should particularly value, all right? Because we're not bringing into existence just another member of the species. We're bringing into existence a new human soul, something that never did exist, something that exists now and will exist forever. And it's the job of the spouses to do their best to form this child, educate this child to be a citizen in the kingdom of God, which of course makes us upgrade our own game a great deal because our children are unlikely to be much better than we are. And so we have to work very hard on becoming the best that we can be in order to help them become the best that they can be. And I, when I see all these beautiful young couples that are really committed to a Christian marriage, and how much they welcome new life, how much every baby is just considered to be this phenomenal gift from God that in a certain sense they want to give back to God. And so it's this reciprocal thing between God and mankind. God gives us this gift and then we want to give it back. And so again, our culture, I mean, someone said, I think it was Japan, I think it was that last year had twice as many deaths as it had births.
Wow.
Whoa. Um, whoa. There's very few countries in the world that are replacing themselves in respect to population. Um, and most of those that are, it's because of immigration that is adding to the number of the population. So, um, I mean, there are countries that give great financial incentives and professional incentives for people to have babies because they realize you can't have a growing economy unless you have a growing population, and that a growing
Mm,
native population, as much as we like to, and I do believe we should, and welcome legal immigrants, and
mhm,
they've done great things for every culture. But if they're integrated, they need to be integrated. A
mm,
culture can learn from them and grow from them. It's not as if they have to become in our mold, but you can't have a tension. You have to have people who want to live together. And so counting on immigration to solve the problem of underpopulation is very unwise. Um, there's many reasons for all of this. One more little thing to put it to it, but that it's most people don't really grow up all that much until they become parents. And someone who is a parent is really quite significantly, radically different from someone who is not. And I mean by that is that they have to learn. They have to learn selflessness, patience, generosity, forgiveness, all of these things. It has to be done every single day in a radical way with your children and your spouse. You have to become incredibly responsible. You have children now, so you see men going from being carefree guys who spend their money on any toy that just kind of catches their little fancy to thinking very seriously about tuition for schools and braces and who we elect for mayor. It all matters now. And so that's why it's so important for a culture to promote marriage, to promote having children, because you get better citizens by doing that.
ah, very true. And again, even back in the ancient world, the political philosophers understood that. But I I'd like to pick up a little bit more in terms of the causes and ask you, do you think the difficulty of getting from anywhere from 2 to 10% of Catholics living according to the teaching to more lies with, let's say, the document. Put it this way: do we need another document? I'm
Mm,
not necessarily thinking that's current pope would issue one, but if we had a pope who said, you know what, I'm going to issue a new document, a new Humani Vitae, a new Casti Connubii, that we need some new explanation, or is it a different cause? Is it there's nothing really wrong with the way it's explained, but something else that's driving the disconnect?
well, I think there always can be. Um, I don't know if you need an encyclical, but documents. John Paul II gave
Mhm.
endless speeches on natural family planning that
Yeah.
in virtually every country he went to.
Mm,
To some extent, you shape it to those
yes.
cultures that you're speaking to. Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, the theology of the body has been incredible addition to promoting Humani Vitae.
Mhm.
The number of people who have studied the theology of the body and uh, quite readily see that contraception is in violation of why God designed human sexuality. Um,
Mm,
I think we have the good arguments. I think we may sometimes again you can frame them better for a different time and a different culture. But the problem is that no one's it's not coming from the pulpit. It's
mm,
not it's there's not enough. It's not enough in marriage prep programs. Um, I've known people who their marriage prep program has consisted in joining a group at 9 in the morning, having
yes.
some big breakfast, going to mass at 10:30, not having time to fast, having lunch afterwards, having some few games like what's your favorite season and what's your
Yes.
color and you sing a few songs or whatever, and that's your marriage prep. I mean, it truly is a joke.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was ours. You almost described it to a T. It was a
yeah,
Saturday 9 to 4, almost what you described.
yes,
Yeah.
it's incredible. I mean, men take 6 years on the average to prepare for the priesthood.
Yes.
And marriage is a vocation. It's a vocation. It's a way of living out your Christian
Mhm.
commitment. So you need to understand what that is, and too few people do. I've started, I it seems I'm being invited to more weddings than ever. Some reason I have a young group of friends whose kids are marriage age, and I'm giving them all about 4 or 5 books. That's what I'm giving them for wedding presents. No more of these mixers or nice pottery pieces or something. They're getting books on marriage from me. So I don't know if they'll read them or not, but they'll be on their shelf, and you just hope that some slow weekend they'll look over there and say, "Hmm, maybe I should read one of those." It's a small gesture, but it's the sort of thing I think that a lot of us need to do. I mean,
Mm,
I've offered to various relatives that I would pay for, some of the very good marriage prep courses I know. One is Witness to Love, and I'd say, "I'll pay for that for you." And it's an extended course. It goes over several months, and they get a mentor couple that they talk to about marriage, and they, watch videos, and then they discuss these videos with each other. And so
mm,
they get a whole new view of marriage from when they started. Most couples are unfortunately cohabiting before marriage. They think that somehow marriage is just a tiny little step, where they
mm,
somehow formalize what they think they already have. Um, and again, don't understand it as they are now making, just as a priest makes and a nun makes, a commitment to a way of life that is very well defined, a Christian way of life. It's not just what they ever they want it to be.
mm. No, that's the parallel is very well drawn between them.
Mhm.
Well, I'd like to actually shift to a second talk of conversation, which I actually think there will be a connection that will come out at the end. But that is, you on your website and other places you have written and talked about finding the traditional Latin Mass. That I just like maybe if you could start by sharing your story, how you came to know it, and how you've come to find an appreciation for it.
Yeah, well, I grew up with the Latin Mass.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was in your email. It might have been someone else's who
Yes.
also did you say something about it, that it was a Sunday thing that was just a low mass and said very quickly?
Must have been someone else. I don't think I
Yes,
said that.
that was a perfect description of
Yes.
my
Yes.
experience, that they did the low mass. My mass, the mass I went to, was customarily about 19 minutes.
Mm,
19 minutes, all right?
wow.
Maybe a closing hymn, maybe an opening hymn, the priest would rush through the Latin. You doubted that he could even say every word in his mind, in the
Mm.
course of doing it. Now, I've always loved foreign languages, and I loved Latin, and so I was happy enough, with that. Didn't bother me. Nobody complained about it. There were no complaints about the mass being in Latin. The complaint really was it was too fast. My dad
Yes.
my dad was not a profound believer, but he was very annoyed. He thought it was disrespectful, and simply not right to only give 19 minutes a week, to God.
Mm.
And, then, I was around when the vernacular came in, and I was around in '65 when it was originally just the same English that was in any missal that we now have.
Yes.
And so it was the Latin Mass in English. It wasn't the Novus Ordo, all right?
Mhm.
Again, people were happy enough with that. There was some talk about why is the Latin gone? Nobody was, as I said, there wasn't any groundswell of
Mhm.
dissatisfaction. Okay. And then all of a sudden there was the Novus Ordo. Um, and I have to admit I was shocked. Um, and then shocked from there on out almost. I mean, it has always been kind of painful for me to go to the Novus Ordo, um, even if it turns out to be a very good mass, and often they
Mm.
are, but you never know what you're gonna get. You just
Yes.
never know. You just especially if you're going out of town and you're trying to find a mass and you, look up one and you go there and you think it's gonna be okay and it's bizarro. Um, I just have a whole hard time during mass thinking, well, I know I'm going to receive Christ here, but everything else is just distracting and annoying and unaesthetic. So many things. So then, uh, I had been taking care of my mother for a couple years in a small town in Pennsylvania. And after she died, I came back to Ann Arbor and discovered that my parish was offering the traditional Latin Mass. I had no idea that there had sprung up a whole movement, um, since Sacros no, since, what is it?
Summorum
Pontificum
pontificum. Yes.
Pontificum, sorry. Um, and, I had no idea had been a whole movement. And I was absolutely won over. I mean, I could not believe, of course, they're done exceptionally well now. Those who are saying the mass love it. And so
Mhm.
there's a beautiful choir and there's incredibly well-trained altar boys, and everything is just plain beautiful. And I just go in and I feel like I'm having every week you probably have this transcendent experience where you know that you're in a very, very sacred place in which, a very, very sacred action is going to take place, and that your job is to get into a state of just profound receptivity, to God's grace, and to be, you know, acknowledging that we're sinful. It seems to me throughout the mass, there's this, I'm very sinful, but
Mhm.
you're very forgiving. In fact, you made the whole world, and you made it because you love us. And yeah, oh yeah, I'm very sinful, but you saved us, and thank you for saving us, and thank you for building this beautiful world. And over again, you go through this kind of a remembrance of the fundamental truths of our faith, and those are precisely what we need to get completely embedded in our being. Now, the studies do show that, only about 1% of those who attend the traditional Latin Mass regularly do not accept the church's teaching. I mean, do not accept the church's
Mhm.
teaching on contraception, homosexuality, all of these things. Those who attend the TLM, and I say, okay, what's cause and what's effect? I mean, do they go to the TLM because they find it more reverential and more traditional, and they are prepared to accept the traditional teachings, or is it that, there's something about the Mass itself, that makes us receptive, to the tradition of the church? I'm sure it's both, but it's a very telling statistic. 100% believe
Mhm.
in the real presence. Only
Yes.
30% Catholics otherwise do. I say, doesn't that wake people up to the phenomenal difference between the two experiences?
Mhm.
Well, one, you go and you can't but know that this is Jesus that's with us. I mean, all the panoply, the robes, the candles, the incense, it's just driven home. When you go to your typical, um, mass, it's just, it is kind of a meal that's being performed up there, and the priest seems a little bit uncomfortable doing this all facing us, and we just don't know quite where to look, and it's just a very different experience.
Well, it's interesting. There were some of the statistics to which I was going to refer, and to get to your chicken and egg causation
Yeah.
point, I think you're right. It's probably a mix of factors, but I'd like to put a theory to you and see what you think about it. The in when you were talking about contraception, I think you said what's really important is it marriage is really about giving. It's about you get married not primarily, because I'm going to get married to get feel good for myself and help myself, but about giving new life to a family, to the society, to heaven eventually, so that marriage is really oriented towards not what you get out of it, although you do benefit from it, but it's towards the giving. And at the traditional mass, at least my experience, I think, is that it is oriented in that way as well. That you do certainly find it efficacious. I've had same experience as you in going, but that you get the sense from the exteriors, from the ceremony, that it's not about you getting, but about giving worship to God, giving God his due, giving respect. Whereas my experience growing up with the new mass you talked about, it's sort of the opposite, right? When even the word meal, you generally go to a meal to get something. Again, there can be elements of giving. Maybe it's a potluck, but generally you go to a restaurant to get something, not to give. And do you think that there may be something in that and the differences of the mass that plays into this understanding proper and not of marriage and
Yes.
conception?
Yes, and that's a very good way of expressing it, and, I would just add another way of expressing it is that the Latin Mass has its own form. It has its form for how it's proper to worship God. Now, of
Mm,
course, since we're the ones who are worshiping God in all sorts of ways, it's shaped to our needs, but it's shaped to our needs in a certain sense as worshipers of God. And we go in and
mm,
we have to submit to something that is not us. All right. This mass is not made in a certain sense. It is for us, but it's for us to be able to worship God correctly. Whereas in Novus Ordo, I mean, you're getting, polka masses and uh, hootenanny masses and masses that only have music that's been composed in the last, 20 years. Um, and so they're trying to shape the mass to us instead of when the mass was in Latin and universal, wherever you went, it was the same mass. All right.
mm,
So you say in Japan and Africa, we're all Catholics and we all worship the same God in the same way. Now, I can understand different cultural shapings to things, but with the Novus Order, you don't know if the church,
mm,
this church, this block, and the church in the next block, if they're going to be in the least bit similar because they're being shaped for the congregation. So I mean, as you said, if you go into marriage and you're defining what you want from marriage, I want a travel companion. I want someone to
mm.
watch movies with at night. I want someone
Yes.
to cook me fine meals. Okay, but if you go into to marriage, is again, this is just like the mass. The mass is God's. It's not ours. Marriage is God's. It's not
Mm,
ours. And so, but there is a way, of course, in which you're getting. But as when I'm getting when I go to mass, but it's a getting that God wants for me. Um, he has decided what to give me instead of for me deciding what I want. And so what spouses should be looking for, again, is a partner in life who wants to get to heaven with them. And you say, in our way of getting to heaven, you can discern that I'm meant to be a spouse. And so
mm,
I want a man or I want a woman who wants to get to heaven and wants to get to heaven together. All right. And so I'm going to be bringing something, and he's going to be bringing some to the relationship that I don't. I mean, what he brings I can't get for myself. It's something that only he can bring. He can bring the maleness, he can bring the fatherhoodness, he can bring, in certain ways, the protector and the provider. The female brings something else. And so you say it's giving. It's giving what God has given you to give to marriage. And you're going to get too. You're going to get the other half of marriage that you can't do on your own. And so again, and you
mm.
can't define it. You can't say, I'm going to define what masculinity is. I'm going to define the masculinity that just fits nicely over here. Nope. God
Yes.
made masculinity what it is. And it drives women crazy on occasions. And same thing with femininity. It drives men crazy. Why can't women be more, that song, why can't a woman be more like a man? And then
Right.
the other one that, what is it? there's nothing like a dame, nothing in the world. It's just the songs that celebrate the differences and the songs that express the tension of the differences. But it's not something we've made, it's something we've received from God. And we have to receive it as a gift, and not try to smooth it all out to make it something that's easy for us to participate in. And I think the Novus Ordo is a kind of making it easy for us, as opposed
Mm.
to challenging us to receive what God wants to give us.
It's interesting. It made me think as you were saying that last part about marriage, another sort of connection and comparison with the religious life. I know priest ones who explained to me, becoming a nun or becoming a monk in a monastery is really unnatural, and not in a bad sense, but in a sense that it's supernatural, and that it's the reason, because I think it was because I asked him, well, why does St. Paul talk about it sort of being higher than marriage if marriage is obviously so important? He says because it's so much more difficult than marriage, because you are going to now live in a community that has not got that balance by definition. So if you're in a convent, you have to live all with the feminine, which is again unnatural, and you therefore need more supernatural help to do that. But it's the very much like the same priest actually said to me, that it takes a very extraordinary couple with extraordinary graces for God to grant the special grace to have only one child or no children. And he
Mhm.
actually said it was the Holy Family, only had one child, but because that was they were the Holy Family, that in a certain sense, having lots of children, as difficult as it may be, it seem at times, is actually much more conducive and is much more helpful. That it takes special graces if God calls you to have to, notwithstanding, not through any fault of yours, but to be infertile, to not be able to have any children or maybe just one child. But it's very different perspective from the modern world view towards that. I mean, many modern people would probably say, well, it's wonderful if you find out you're infertile, that's a blessing. Whereas in many ways, it's a special cross that God gives.
Yes, there's evidently more and more people who never want to have children, but
Mm,
it's still a very small group. Um,
yes.
Most people very, very much want to be parents, and fertility is a huge cross.
Mm,
And it is fulfillment of our nature. I mean,
mm,
our very bodies. This is what theology of the body teaches: is that our very bodies teach us that we are meant for union with another of the opposite sex,
yes.
and that union results in children. Right? Those are biological facts that are just as rawly manifest as can be believed. And the fact that we can ignore these and say that they're not, that this is not a defining feature of the human person is just it's phenomenal
Yes.
denial of reality. And once you accept that reality, and many women find this, that our culture is a culture that, at the same time that it hates males, they think there's you hear the phrase masculine toxicity all the time.
Yes.
At the same time, there is a way in which our culture celebrates male achievement, making a lot of money, having a lot of
Mm,
prestige, you know, having a big house and an expensive car and beautiful vacations and that sort of thing. And so that women are kind of from day one taught to be achievers, just like males are thought to be achievers.
mm,
Get into the best college that you can, get the best job that you can, get the highest salary that you can. And that's not a woman's natural trajectory, right? But we're not taught that. We're actually taught it'd be kind of embarrassing to be taught from day one that you want to be a good mother and you want to be a good wife. And people say, "What about me? What about me?" You say, "That is about you. That is about
yes.
you." Uh, and the women I see who have so many women I know that they came from very small families and they have very large families now, and they just have loved it so much, and it just it's just remarkable. And then sometimes they may have a lot of kids, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids, and now they're in their early 40s and they sort of really want a baby, but they don't really know, or some of them don't want
Mm,
another baby. It's like, I'm 43, that's enough. Another baby comes and it's just like, oh, how could I ever been opposed to this?
yes.
You know, you see
Yes.
this over and over again. And the men too, honestly. I had one friend who was not at all happy that his wife was pregnant again. They already had 8 kids, I think, and very generous with God. And he wasn't at all happy. But boy, that little girl made his life. When she was
Mm.
it just on his lap, everything, well into her adulthood. She was his companion. And so I think it's very when people I think it's very natural for people to want to have children and very natural for people to want to have many children. But our culture has made that it's like a decision. You have to make a decision to have children. You have to
Mhm.
consider the environment and the climate and all of these things. And are you ready? And all this. Can you afford it? Um, I mean, when I think about what my parents lived on and managed, it's incredible, you know. And we did with all secondhand stuff and bargain basement stuff, and we, think of going to Disneyland was insane. We might be able to go to the country fair, and we
Mm.
had a great time. We had a great time. And my dad got somewhat prosperous between the first four and the second two, which was about 7 years. And he started making a lot more money. And those kids went to the country club and they went to Disneyland. We never envied them 1 minute.
Mm.
We didn't have that. I said, "No, no, we had putt-putt golf. We had the favorite player, you know? We had the merry-go-round at the grocery store. What more did we need?" And so people don't understand how much fun kids can have with really just about next to nothing. Um,
Yes.
they can play with it. I watch some of my nephews outside, and as they say, a stick and a ball is just about all a boy needs to be happy in a puddle or a stream and a few rocks. You can't make a boy happier than that. You know,
Or I've seen children have more fun playing with the box that some expensive gift came in than the
exactly,
gift itself. But
exactly.
well, as we're getting towards the end of our time together, one thing, you and I recently met at the Coalition for Canceled Priests conference in Chicago, which was an excellent conference. I wish I could have stayed a little longer, but I had to leave due to some family commitments. But one of the things I heard from several of the priests I met there, which again go back to the two threads we've talked about, they basically said the easiest way to get canceled, become a canceled priest, are one of two things: say the traditional Latin mass and preach about abortion. And almost every priest I talked to said, "Well, why did you get canceled?" Because I asked, "What's your story?" They'd say, either I was saying the traditional Latin mass and fell out with the chancery office, or I gave 2 sermons in a row on contraception. Somebody called the chancery, and I ended up eventually being canceled. What would you obviously spent many years teaching in a seminary. What would you say? Do you have any message for priests out there who sort of either one of these things, who are tempted to think, well, you know what, I'll just sidestep all this because it's that seems to be true, that it's a road to be canceled. Do you have any advice or anything you'd offer to
Well,
some priests out
what
there?
I did tell my priests, my seminarians, is that you really do need to learn true discernment. That God is
Mm.
going to tell some of you to stick your neck out there and get it chopped off. That's what he's going to do. He's going to say, "I want you to give a homily on homosexuality." Um, you're going to get in trouble. Now, there's various ways of teaching these things without necessarily giving a hard hitting
Hmm.
homily. I mean, I taught students how to um, give homilies on controversial issues, but that was before they'd be canceled for that. And
Hmm.
even when we heard them, and even when they would give them in my classroom to practice, we were just sort of, we'd all sit there and say, "Whoa, he's giving a homily against homosexual behavior.
Hmm.
No, I've never heard that from a pulpit. It sounds very strange. It sounds very strange." And it was nobody had examples. Nobody had mentors. Nobody had a recollection of a great homily given on these things because we didn't hear any homilies on them. So
Hmm.
that in itself showed you the sad state of the church. All right. And what I just simply don't understand, if a priest gives a insensitive, priest can, of course, they can give an
Sure.
insensitive homily. Why in the world would that be a reason for canceling him? I mean,
Hmm.
that'd be a reason for turning him over to some sensitive priest who teaches them how to do this with sensitivity rather than with a hammer. Um,
Hmm.
I can't imagine canceling a priest for, insensitively teaching a church teaching. I would say
Yes.
just needs some instruction, and he can apologize to his parishioners, and he can say, "I'm sorry, I guess I was heavy-handed. I'm trying to learn a new way, but your salvation depends upon knowing these things." And that most of the
Mhm.
ones that I know who start their homilies with, "My salvation depends upon being
Your
concerned about your salvation," and that's why it's
yes.
not going to be fun for me. People are going to criticize me. People are going to be mad at me. But I'm doing this because I love you and I want your souls to be saved. So, one would be to try really hard if they feel called, and I hope they do, in a way to speak on these difficult topics. There's other ways of doing it. They can refer people to websites, and I mean, I had one priest who uh, did have and this was maybe too many, maybe it's changed, it's gotten worse and worse. I don't know, but this was maybe 15, 20 years ago. He said that he had a big session for his congregation on homosexuality. Um, and I asked him, how did he had a group, like he got 400 people to come to it. And he asked all the confirmation kids to come, and they all brought a friend. And they had pizza and music and all sorts of things. And I said, "How did you do that?" He said, "Well, I'd already been giving talks against contraception, so they already knew that homosexuality is wrong." He said, "That wasn't the hard part, was contraception, not the homosexuality, because I'd already been doing that." And of course, the contraception was not so hard once you had already preached on abortion. And so, but again, it's not so much preaching it as a wrong, in particular respect to contraception, is saying what marriage is all about. As you
Mm,
said from the very start, it requires a proper understanding of marriage, which requires a proper understanding of being a Christian. And right in the heart of an understanding of being a Christian is the cross, right? It's going to be hard. If you think it's too hard, well, then it's not. All right, so not getting an abortion on occasion is really, really hard, okay? Not engaging in homosexual relations is really, really hard for some people, right? But that's the cross. And so they have to be
mm,
preaching all along. They have to be preaching the cross, not just in respect to these sexual issues, but in everything, being generous with our time and our money and our
yes.
purse, um, and all of this. So, and others, say so. But some of you, I do think God is probably going to say, go stick your head up. Um, you're gonna get crucified, but I want that of you. And others, he's
Mm,
going to say, keep your head down, attend to your parish, try to form this parish, try to not draw any notice to what you're doing, just do what you're doing. And I don't think that's cowardice. I think that can absolutely be prudence, and God's going to ask that of some people. Some of these men might say, I'd rather just stand up here and do, brimstone and fire and all of that, but that's not what God wants of me. God wants
mm,
me to very slowly and gradually bring this congregation along, and bring them along. Um, so it's not a one size fits all answer, um, to that question. As far as the
mm,
Latin Mass is concerned, I would like all of them to learn it and maybe say
mm,
it for the private Mass.
mm,
And then when it's permitted to say publicly, do it. And then maybe when it's suppressed, you do it some other way. But
mm,
I would think everyone would want to learn it. And uh, uh, everyone I know that has learned it has been so happy they have, and they cannot believe that this was never taught them in the seminary.
mm,
And the young priests that never went to it, and never heard of it, they're just stunned at and they feel their priestly role so much more profoundly,
mm,
because they are praying very obviously to God, and they're obviously praying for the whole congregation. And I mean, I look at the priest as sort of having all of our burdens on his back, and he's taking them to God the Father, and he's taking on himself the sacrificial persona of God the Son. And they are, through this interaction and this prayer, we are being saved, right? It's just so physically obvious. It can't be ignored. Whereas the other one often seems, again, just like a happy, clappy celebration.
mm,
Uh, and the priest feels it. He feels like nobody can do this but me. And I need to enter profoundly into prayer. It's very hard to enter profoundly into prayer when you're looking at a whole congregation, babies crying, people moving,
yes.
this and the other thing. When you're focused right here on the altar and have
Mm,
specific actions, so I don't know how many sta- uh, ma- uh, makings of the cross, you do, and
Mm.
it concentrates you on what you're doing.
Wow, very true. Well, thank you for sharing your time, your wisdom with us. As we mentioned in the beginning, and a show for those watching the video, this is Dr. Janet Smith's website. It's actually an easy one to remember, just janetsmith.org. It's filled with lots of resources, articles, information, and the talk that we spoke about in the beginning right here can be freely downloaded. So if you've found any parts of this conversation interesting, please consider going over and taking a look at her website.
Thank you for having me, Brian. You're a very good interviewer. That was fun.
Thank you. It was fun. I appreciate it, and I hope even though you're retired, I think it says at the bottom of your email, but not you're not finished. So good luck with all your future
Okay,
work and
great.
projects.
Thank you so much, Brian. God bless you.